Let me guess, 2025 is not the first year that you have put learning Portuguese on your list of resolutions. But somehow you never start because you feel too overwhelmed, or you start with a course but you don't stick to it because it gets difficult and dull, or you get frustrated and give up after playing with an app for a few days. Well, if that sounds like you, then you are in the right place. My name is Liz and I teach practical Portuguese in plain English, helping people who are relocating or retiring to Portugal to get conversational fast. I took a little break at the end of last year, so what better way to dive back in than to answer your questions about learning Portuguese and living in Portugal. We do this every week with my students inside the Portuguese Pro program, where my students go from saying their very first words up to having their first conversation, and it's really crucial to their progress. I'm going to drop some student testimonials and my free 60-minute taster lesson for Portuguese in the description, so make sure you check that out. So we've been checking the comments and DMs on our socials to see where you are feeling stuck and what you need to know. So let's get started. So the first question says, "Hey Liz, I love your videos, thank you. Would you ever be up for doing a grammar vocab vid on small words which are the bane of my existence? So things like in, on, to, etc." Yes, absolutely, and don't worry, these are the bane of a lot of learners' existence. The words that you are talking about are called prepositions, okay? And what they are doing in a sentence is describing the relation between two things. So for example, the cat is on the table. The word on there is the preposition and it is explaining where the cat is in relation to the table. So all these really small words like in, on, at, to, these are prepositions, and even though they are very small words, they can cause a very big headache. The reason being is because we can't translate them directly from one language to another, and you certainly can't do it between English and Portuguese. So I can't learn the word em and decide that that means in for every single use of the word em that I see in Portuguese, because that isn't the case. So the best tip that I can give you, I mean, this is a very big grammar lesson. I have it inside my program, not till module 4. That's how difficult this is. But if I could give you any advice at this stage, it would be to learn prepositions in context. So what do I mean by this? Whenever you see a phrase that uses a preposition, I want you to examine it and say, okay, that is a preposition I need to use in that context. For example, in the phrase in Portuguese, I'm thinking about you. In English, we use the word about. But in Portuguese, the phrase is estou a pensar em ti. Okay? So I have to remember that whenever I'm using this phrase, thinking about, I need to use the preposition em. It's also possible to pair certain verbs with certain prepositions, so you should definitely look out for those as well. For example, estou apaixonada por. I am in love with in English, but we use por in Portuguese. So instead of just learning the prepositions with a direct translation, because it doesn't work, you're going to need to learn some full sentences, which is going to give you the context of when you should use each one. When referring to breakfast, when do you use café de manhã versus pequeno almoço? Okay, so you are going to hear both of these things in Portugal. The truth is that café de manhã is how the Brazilians are going to say it. So sometimes when we hear two options for the same thing, the most common thing is because in Brazil they say one thing and in Portugal they say another. So when I lived in Brazil, this is how we referred to breakfast. So it literally means morning coffee, and that's how Brazilians will refer to breakfast. Now in Portugal, what we're going to say is pequeno almoço, okay? And make sure that we have this hyphen in the middle, because this is going to make it kind of one word, which does literally mean small lunch. But when we have that hyphen in the middle and create one word from it, it's going to mean breakfast in Portugal, okay? So if we don't have the hyphen here, that's when it is going to literally mean a small lunch. But I think this is the one that you're most likely going to be using in Portugal, pequeno almoço. Next question. Hi Liz, thank you for your dedication to teaching Portuguese. You're welcome. Can you recommend any cartoons in European Portuguese to assist with learning? Yes, I actually did a whole video on learning with kids. I will link it in the description below. And using TV is one of the things that we mention because, of course, children's TV is a lot more simple, so you may have an easier time following it. The good news is that nowadays there is so much more content available with European Portuguese audio. When I started this channel 5 years ago, it was really difficult to come across. So you're very lucky in that sense. So a national channel like RTP also has a kids channel. You can look it up within the app or also online. It's called Zigzag. You can also use things like Disney Plus. You can now get those cartoons, those tales that we all know and love. You could get them with Portuguese audio as well. You can also get the subtitles at the same time, but just bear in mind these won't match up exactly because these are actually for the hearing impaired rather than being a like-for-like translation of what is being said in Portuguese. I can't wait for my daughter to be old enough to watch a Bluey. That is the one that we're going to be watching together, but I'm saving all the episodes for us to be able to enjoy together. Next question. What do you like most about living in Portugal? That one's easy, I think. I think here in Portugal, you can enjoy the simple things really easily. You can go to the beach, you can have a nice fish meal, you can get really great wine, you can go on a walk, on a hike in the forest. You've got access to so many different kind of geographies here in Portugal. So even by just traveling an hour from Lisbon, which is where I live, we can reach so many different types of places, whether we want beach or mountains, or we want some city action, or we want some really quiet rural time. There is so much to enjoy in terms of Portugal's natural beauty. You really don't have to spend a ton to do anything extravagant. And I think that the Portuguese also have a really nice idea about the simplicity of life. Like they really value family, they really value getting together for meals together, parties in the street, taking a holiday, all of those things. It's a really, really nice culture to enjoy those things. So I'd say that's what I enjoy most about living in Portugal. Next question, why did you initially choose to learn Portuguese? Well, the story isn't that interesting. I really wish the story was more interesting. I don't have any Portuguese relatives, which is what a lot of people think. I actually just really enjoyed learning Spanish at school, and when it came time to choosing what I was going to study at university, lots of universities offered Spanish and Portuguese. So I was like, well, that sounds fun. And then when I started Portuguese, I just loved it because I thought it was kind of different because so many hundreds of people were learning Spanish at university and we were really just a handful full of people who were learning Portuguese. So I really fell in love with the Portuguese and the Brazilian culture, which we were able to learn about at university. And it just grew from there, really. I just got really obsessed with it. And I think I also noticed it was kind of like an underrepresented language when it comes to like academics. I always remember that I would say that I went to get my textbooks from Blackwell's, the academic bookstore, and the Portuguese books were filed under miscellaneous languages. And I was like, what? This is the 6th most widely spoken language in the world. Why is it under miscellaneous languages? So that's when I decided to start a Portuguese society at uni, and we organised trips to Portugal, ways to get to know Portuguese exchange students. So yeah, this has been going on for a long time. Since 2005 is when I've been really obsessed with and enjoying the Portuguese culture. So that's the story. I get confused when using Portuguese when they say me, te, etc. For example, why is it sinto-me muito curioso? Any advice? Okay, so me, te, se, and lots of others are what we call pronouns, okay? And there are lots of different types in Portuguese, but the one in this question in particular is referring to reflexive pronouns. And these are quite easy to explain. So we have reflexive verbs. In Portuguese, there's only a finite number of them. But what does it mean, a reflexive verb? It's quite simple. It means that the action is happening to one's self, okay? So a good example would be, I enjoy myself. So all of those words in English, myself, yourself, themselves, that's showing this kind of reflexive action in the verb. The verb is being carried out, but it's also happening to the person who is speaking. So in Portuguese, as I say, we've got a finite number of these reflexive verbs. An example would be levantar-se. And that little "se" stuck on the end tells me that this is a reflexive verb, so it's something that happens to one's self. So this means to get up, but I would kind of translate it to I get myself up. Okay, so levanto-me às 8. I get myself up at 8. Okay, so that little "me" that is stuck on the end of that reflexive verb is saying myself. So that's the answer to that one. Next question. I have found that English and Portuguese phrases using give and take, come and go are sometimes reversed. Yes, this can be very confusing. I actually did a whole live workshop on confusing verbs. I'm going to link that in the description below. We cover a lot of these verbs that seem to mean several things. So how do we know which one to use when? So I think you'll find that session very helpful. So in terms of to take or to bring in Portuguese, we have two verbs. Levar is to take. So that's where we're going to take something from here to where we are going over there. And the verb trazer is the verb to bring. So that's something we're going to bring from over there to here. Okay. The confusion arises is because actually in English, it's bring and take that can be used interchangeably. So for example, we're going to the concert and I'm going to bring my jacket. We're going to the concert and I'm going to take my jacket. So you can see how in English, I can use either of those verbs. Whereas in Portuguese, we should be remembering which one to use when, okay? So levar is to take something from here to there, and trazer is to take something from there to here. Next question. What is something about life in Portugal that's been difficult to adjust to? Well, I did a couple of videos on this called What I Wish I'd Known Before Moving to Portugal. Again, I'll link them in the description where I talk about some of the aspects that are more challenging. So in this, I talked about how cold the winters are, not just because it doesn't get cold outside. No, it doesn't get freezing cold outside, but lots of the houses don't have heating. So if you're not lucky and you rent somewhere without realizing that it doesn't have heating, you're going to be pretty cold for the winter. Also, the bureaucracy. I know everybody says this, but it really is next level. It's very, very complicated to get things done. You'll pretty much always go to your appointment and not have the right document, or some kind of issue will come up, and it can be very long and frustrating to solve. That's the same in a lot of countries, right? But I have to say, in England, those things usually are a bit more straightforward. On that same train of thought as bureaucracy, in general, you just need to get used to things moving at a slightly slower pace. And I think that it's important to remember that you came here for a reason. This is what I mentioned in that video. You know, I was definitely escaping the hustle and bustle of London. So it was a big swing in the other direction to come to Portugal, where things move a lot more slowly. But again, I think that is what I was looking for. So you kind of have to take the rough with the smooth and just practice patience. I'm definitely a lot better at it now than I used to be. Something that I really noticed in the last time that I went to the UK was how much easier it is to buy things there. All sorts of things like cosmetics and toiletries are quite expensive to get here in Portugal, and you just don't have the same ease of popping into a shop. I was so spoiled when I went home to the UK this last time. We had a Co-op and a Sainsbury's local right on the same street, really close to where we were living, so we could always pop in and out in 5 minutes. We would know that they had what we wanted and that I would be out in 5 minutes because they had self-service checkouts. So shopping in general is a lot more long and complicated here. So the supermarkets, you will definitely be spending 30 minutes in there in the queue for the checkout. And, you know, sometimes they won't have what you want. So yeah, It's okay because I visit the UK so often, I'm always able to stock up on the things that I like digestive biscuits, for example. So final question in this video, what are your tips and insights for someone who is just moving to Portugal? Well, first of all, congratulations, you're about to embark on an amazing journey. Obviously, I love living here. I've decided to stay and raise my family here, so obviously I really do think that it's such a special place. I would say 2 things that would be really important. Number 1, make sure you come and visit and live in various places before you decide where you want to settle down. So for example, I have lots of students who moved to the Algarve, but then they realized, actually, I want a more Portuguese way of life, and the Algarve really is full of a lot of expats and tourists. This actually is a story of my student Melanie. She has such a wonderful story that even though she'd been living in Portugal for over a decade, when she moved up north, that was when she made a huge breakthrough in her Portuguese when she joined us. It is such a heartwarming story of how she finally got confident and then joined all sorts of clubs, knitting club, walking club, really getting out there into the community. I'm going to link her interview below in case you're interested to see if you are somebody who is moving here. So yeah, make sure that you're really clear on the area that you want to live in and why, because as I said before, Portugal has a really diverse geography and you need to be sure about what you're getting into. If you like city life versus rural life, it's a really important one to know. And the second one, of course, is I am a language teacher, so I firmly believe it is very important to learn Portuguese if you are going to be living here. The difference is just night and day in terms of the experience that you can have living in Portugal, whether you're only speaking English versus being able to converse in Portuguese as well. So again, this is what I do. This is what my students are able to do with my help. Their testimonial videos where they talk about really making their house a home and being accepted and welcomed into their local community is really why I do what I do. So that is the number 1 thing for me. Really give learning Portuguese a good go because the locals are really going to appreciate you for it. So if you are like Laura and you are moving to Portugal, you simply have to come to my free lesson for beginners. I call it the ultimate quick start guide to getting conversational in Portuguese. It is the best 60 minutes you will spend on pronunciation, essential grammar, and even starting to hone your listening skills. The link to register is in the description, so I hope to see you there. Ciao for now.